Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 9th meeting of the Corporate Services Committee. It being 12 p.m., I am going to call the meeting to order. And as always, I will begin by acknowledging that the City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Pewak, and Attawandaron. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. And as representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. I will also remind those at home and those present in chambers that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca or phone 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Colleagues, I'll begin the meeting and I want to acknowledge Councillor Ferreira and Councillor Stevenson are joining us by Zoom. The remainder of the committee is in chambers, and Councillor Pribble is also visiting us at committee today. I will begin by looking for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Moving along to item 2, which is the consent agenda. We have 2 items. 2.1 is the Integrity Commissioner Appointment and Agreement, and 2.2 is the Procurement of Goods and Services Policy Revisions. I do know Councillor Stevenson indicated she has a number of questions on 2.2. I'm wondering if colleagues need these dealt with separately or together. And I'll look for a motion either way, but I just want to see if colleagues want anything pulled.
If we could do them separately, that would be great.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. We can certainly do that. So I'll look for any questions or comments on 2.1. We'll deal with that first. That's the Integrity Commissioner Appointment and Agreement. I'm seeing none, so I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Trussow and seconded by Councillor McAllister. And I will ask the clerk to open the vote on 2.1.
I vote yes.
I vote yes.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, colleagues. So moving on to 2.2, Procurement of Goods and Services Policy Revisions. I do know that Councillor Stevenson has some questions to ask on this one, so I will start with you, Councillor Stevenson. At some point, I will look for a motion to get on the floor, but I do know that you had some questions that you've shared with staff in advance, so I'll look to you first to start the discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Really, my question for today is if it could just be explained to me around 2.2b, the removal of the supplier spending report. It says that there's detailed information in the annual compliance reporting such that this no longer serves a meaningful purpose. And I was just hoping staff could explain a little about that annual compliance reporting and what's included in there.
Thank you, and I'll look to Ms. Barbone and her team there. Ms. Barbone.
Thank you, through the chair. So last CSC, and forgive me, the date is not just coming to April, whatever it was, specifically that CSC had the annual compliance report that was brought forward. So within it, there are a number of components that we follow through. So there are a couple of motions that we are obligated to follow through, and we verify and review every single procurement that was done throughout the year to bring any items forward. So there are a number of elements that that we bring forward. There is an administrative component, so all of the delegated authority that was done throughout the year is itemized, and we have a number of those components that appeared in the report for which council approves and solidifies the review of the annual procurement. So one of the things we've done is to take a very proactive approach to try to look at how we bolster our policy each and every year and how we ensure that all service areas are maintaining adequate knowledge and training of the policy and compliance with the policy, and then what our annual reporting is out to council. So through that process, there's a number of schedules that were contained in that most recent report that council just approved last week. And one of the reports is simply an information report that lists cumulatively for the entire year all of the spending for every single vendor throughout the year on a calendar basis that is reported. So it, in and of itself, really provides a snapshot of the vendors that have been procured throughout the City of London or for which a payment was made. But there's no context because one vendor could be used to provide different services. It's really just a cumulative total of all the vendors that we use throughout. And given that we have boards and commissions and things that we procure on others' behalf that are embedded within, there's a lot of work that actually goes in to trying to take the spending and parse out all of the things that are done through our accounting system for boards and commissions and other things for which spending is done through our system, but that actually apply to non-City of London direct procurement. So that report has been an information report. It is something that predated a lot of the compliance work that we do to bring forward to the council each and every year, and really has a lot of time and effort to go in that really doesn't serve any value other than just an informational total of the number of vendors with a great deal of work that has to go into it. So that's really where we're proposing is that, you know, it doesn't really, you know, and unless of course it's the will of council if they wish to keep it, but it doesn't serve a compliance purpose given the work that is done to bring forward all of the procurements for delegated authority and administrative requirements and that ultimately require council approval to provide. So that is our recommendation, is to remove that just because there is a significant workload and really isn't telling council a lot of information because there could be multiple things that are going through the totals in a particular year.
Thank you, Ms. Barbon. Councillor Stevenson, I'll look back to see if you've got any follow-up to that.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Is there any, I'm wondering when we say it takes a lot of time, just approximately like what kind of time we are talking about, and if it was considered to maybe scale it back rather than cut it out completely so that maybe it didn't include our boards and commissions and was just city administration?
Ms. Barbon?
Thank you through the chair. So our procurement policy does not consider boards and commissions. Therefore, when we run our information to do this report, it picks up all of the procurements that are done throughout the city. So the work involved is to strip out all the stuff that is actually not subject to the policy because it was spent, because a lot of these boards and commissions do share the City of London's system. So that's where the workload involves, is to actually prepare the report in the form, if we were to run it just as is, it would be a whole bunch of stuff that actually isn't the City of London's because that's the default on the system. And unfortunately, there's no way just to print the report with all that stuff done automatically. There's a level of intervention that needs to go in.
Thank you, Ms. Barbon. Councillor Stevenson, anything further?
Yeah, just is there a reason why we wouldn't be able to just release that report, including all of the boards and commissions? I understand that it doesn't fall under the procurement policy, but I'm just wondering if that's an option.
Ms. Barbon.
Thank you through the chair. I think the whole purpose is what's the intent and how is that information useful to anybody who's reviewing it, and when it includes information that is totally not relevant and ultimately needs to be analyzed to actually give it the intent for what is governed by the procurement policy. So I think that's really the intent is, I mean, certainly we could release that without any context, but it doesn't actually, I think the question is what's the purpose and how is that useful to a public reading that and/or council when they're ultimately looking at. And Mr. Collins actually can speak to how long it takes to prepare that report.
Mr. Collins.
Through the chair to committee, the time involved by our accounts payable team to go through all our payments that have been made through a calendar year takes approximately 2 to 3 weeks. And aside from isolating out our boards and commission payments, we take a look and extract out payments made for payroll liabilities and employee benefits, school board payments as we pass on the education tax that we collect as part of the property tax billing. Also payments to individuals, non-contractors, where they're not actually suppliers to the city, but the city does have to pay individuals occasionally. For example, during the municipal election, there was a number of elected staff that were paid that were administering the election. We also have to strip out property tax payments and payments processed by our AP team on behalf of some of our boards, such as the Elgin Water Board, Huron Water Board, Tourism London, and the Housing Development Corporation. Further, we pay out security releases, insurance premiums, claim settlements, and justice services that are gone through our legal area, which once again is not in scope of the procurement of goods and services policy. So there is some manual intervention to extract out all the payments that the city makes in the course of a calendar year. And this just reflects cumulative spend where we've paid a vendor or supplier greater than $100,000 in a calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I follow up to see if there's questions from other councillors or any further questions from Councillor Stevenson, I'm just going to quickly ask for a little, I guess, point of clarification, Mr. Collins, because you talked about a number of transfers. Would that include transferring the levies we collect for our BIAs back to them for their purposes as well? And I'm seeing nods on that, so that would be part of that as well. So looking for any more questions on this, Councillor Stevenson or other members of the committee? Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, just one last one. I guess for me, I quite liked looking through that report, and it was a little bit like the sunshine list. You know, it just lets us have a look at what payments are being made. Is it possible to, like, is there other alternatives, I guess is what I'm asking, to be able to provide the transparency and the openness without 2 or 3 weeks of work?
Ms. Barbone or Mr. Collins?
Thank you, through the chair. So the majority of procurements are done and approved by council. So they ultimately end up here. So a lot of those are reflected within that summary that is provided. Obviously, there's many other payments that the city collects that we have to transfer through that are not procurements. They are simply collection of funds. And you named the BIA. That's a perfect example of where the city collects things and has to disperse because it's statutorily required to do so. So where the items come forward that there's the transparency is the listing of things that are delegated to civic administration, which are contained within those reports. So a lot of the things that you see in that greater than 100,000 are already contained within the other appendices that are provided as part of that report. So there's a lot of double counting. So I mean, certainly in terms of listing them, I can't think of another way quickly off the top of my head. I'd have to think about that if there's another way, but I believe the majority of them are already through council and approved through council through the large procurements that are made and through our ultimate, our spending and monitoring reports when we report through the various channels that we have through our budget.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the information. I'm going to think about this a little bit more. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? I'm seeing none. And I just looked over toward 13 seat, and Councillor Ferreira is on the screen today instead of on my left side. So I was looking over to your empty seat, Councillor, but that said, I don't see anyone else with questions or comments, so I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder for the staff recommendation. Moved by Councillor McAllister and seconded by Councillor Ferreira. And I will ask the clerk to open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving along, there are no scheduled items, so that brings us to section 4, items for direction. There are 3 applications for proclamations, and I'm looking to see if colleagues want to deal with these separately or if we're prepared to move them as a group. Councillor Trussow.
I think I raise this every meeting. We get applications that are on their face incomplete, and they're still forwarded on to council. So item 4.1, unless I'm missing something, does not have anything on it referring to a person in the City of London. And, you know, I hate to be the one to pull it because it's a good cause, but I think that if we have this policy, we have to enforce it. So could they be sent, could you look at that quickly to make sure I'm not missing something? And maybe they could be sent a note saying,
Yes, give us just a second and let me check on that. So just a quick check with the clerk and to let colleagues know, this organization has applied before. They do not require the proclamation until June 18th. So we would certainly have time to refer this back with direction to the clerks to reach out and ask for the organization to respond with their London connection, if that's satisfactory to the committee. Okay, so I'm seeing Councillor Trussow supporting that direction. So why don't we deal with 4.1 first as a referral back with some direction, and then we can deal with the other 2 proclamations. So I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder for referral, and that's moved by Councillor Trussow. And it just seconded by Councillor Ferreira. And we'll just make sure that the clerk has a moment to include that the direction will include reaching out to the organization. And that should be open now, referred back to staff for further clarification.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Look to see if we've got a mover to deal with 4.2 and 4.3 together. These are the proclamations for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and the issuance of a proclamation for World Refugee Day. Moved by Councillor McAllister and seconded by Councillor Ferreira. Any discussion on these? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote for that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving on, item 5, deferred matters and additional business. Councillor Trussow.
just a question to the chair, to the clerk. Would it be possible for these not to come to council if on their face they're defective and are going to get pushed back anyway? Just do that administratively?
And let's go to the clerk on that.
So if you're looking to seek clarification on the London connection, that certainly can be something we can follow up with staff, but we would need direction in the change of a formal policy change in order to seek any further clarifications.
Thank you, clerk. So that might be something that the committee might want to consider bringing forward as a motion to a future meeting. And that way we've got some time to discuss it and debate it when it comes forward and it's on the public agenda so that folks are aware that we might potentially make a change there. Any other deferred matters or additional business? Seeing none. So we do have 2 items to deal with in camera. So I will look for a motion to go in camera, and I will just advise members of the public. Our reasons for going in camera are with regard to land acquisition and disposition, client solicitor privilege and criteria or instructions to be applied to any negotiations. And the second item is labor relations employee negotiations. Again, solicitor client privileged advice on matters that may potentially see litigation or go before an administrative tribunal. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder to go in camera. Moved by Councillor Trussow, seconded by Councillor McAllister. And I will ask the clerk to open the vote on that now. Councillor Stevenson, are you still with us?
I am. It's not coming up. I vote yes.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, everyone. We've already started to shuffle some of the deck chairs, but we'll just give the clerk a moment to make sure that we have all the appropriate people in the Zoom meeting and that everything is ready to go, and then we'll begin our confidential session.